about you, but one of my favorite shows growing up was Are You Afraid of the Dark? Similar to Goosebumps, kind of scary stories.
Like an older crowd,
yeah,
I
had like some teenagers hanging out. They were called the Midnight Society, and they would sit around a campfire and they would tell scary stories. Well, we have our own Midnight Society here tonight.
We do.
Me, you, our homies out there in the interwebs. We're going to listen to a story by the campfire told by John B. Allen. Yes, MrBallen is out next to the flames as they flicker in front of his face.
Ghost story?
Telling a ghost story. I'm here for it. I'm down. Are you guys good with it?
I am.
Nikki, you
I
are?
like a good scary story, especially by the fire.
Let's see what he has to say. This is called Thailand's Most Convincing Ghost Story.
Tonight, I'm going to tell you a very famous story from Thailand. This story was recommended to me by a fan, actually, and I had never heard of it before. But the second I started looking into this, I knew that I had to tell this one, and not just tell it, I had to tell it sitting in front of a campfire. This is like classic, scary campfire storytelling.
Okay.
But before we get into tonight's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right campfire, because that's all we do, and we upload 2, 3, even 4 times a week. So, if that's of interest to you, the next time you and the like button are at a campfire together, offer them some nice hot coffee. But don't tell them you've put hot sauce in it. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into tonight's story.
He's going to have to figure out how to switch between the cameras if he's going to have 2 cameras.
It's a different setup.
It's different. Devoted wife.
Hey, learn lessons here, Nikki.
Okay.
One morning in the early 1850s, a young man named Mok rowed a small boat through a canal in Prakanong, Thailand, which is a very rural community southeast of Bangkok. And Mok was rowing as fast as he possibly could, because where he was going was home and he could not wait to get there. So Mok had been away for almost an entire year by this point.
Damn.
And that was because around a year ago, he'd been drafted into the Thai military and forced to go fight in a war against the neighboring country of Burma. And for Mok, getting drafted had really come at like the absolute worst possible time. Because at the time, his wife, May Nok, had been just a couple of months pregnant with their first child.
Why?
And so he had to just, basically leave her behind to give birth on her own, which was obviously really difficult for her and for him. Like, he wanted to be there for her and he couldn't. And also, this is 1850s in rural Thailand. So once he was gone, there were no phones.
He was fucking gone.
Any way to send letters back and forth. So really, ever since Mok had left, he'd had literally zero communication with his wife. So he has no idea how she's doing, how the baby's doing, nothing. And, he's off fighting in a war.
Yeah.
And in fact, he actually got hurt while he was fighting and had to spend months in a military hospital recovering. But his wife had no idea.
Shit.
So Mok rode even faster, and finally, he saw his home in the distance. It was a wooden house that stood on tall stilts right on the edge of the canal with a large balcony that overlooked the water. And it was
Sounds
surrounded
badass.
by lime trees and thick forest. And it was at least a mile away from the nearest neighbors. So it's a pretty secluded place, but it was a place he desperately missed. As Mok neared the small dock in front of his house, he began excitedly calling out for his wife. And as he did, he began tying up the boat, expecting at any moment to see his wife come running outside with the baby. But his wife didn't. She didn't call back. She didn't come out. It was just quiet. And for a moment, Mok had this horrible thought that maybe something had happened to her while he was gone. Like, how would he know? But then he heard the door open, and out came his wife with a big grin on her face, and she was clutching their baby against her chest. She began calling out to him, and Mok saw there were tears of joy streaming down her face, and he leapt out of the boat and he ran to her. A few days later, Mok woke up inside of his home, and he rolled over in bed and saw his wife still asleep, and he also saw their baby sleeping in a small hammock right beside the bed. And as Mok looked at his little family, he felt almost deliriously happy. I mean, ever since he had gotten home, it was like
Could you imagine?
Entered this just perfect life, like just
coming back from
utter
war,
domestic bliss. His baby would turn out to be a boy, which he was really excited about because he had sort of secretly wanted a son. And, over the last couple of days, he had had a chance to basically tell his wife all of his crazy war stories. And she had listened really intently, and she also had gone out of her way to cook him all his favorite meals. And so he was just so grateful to be back here that he literally had not left their home at all since he got back. He just stayed home and just enjoyed this unbelievable homecoming. But on this particular morning, Mock knew he would have to leave because he had to go to the market because their kitchen was basically empty, so they needed food. And so Mock, he climbed out of bed, and as quietly as he could, he got dressed, trying hard not to wake up the baby or his wife. And then when he was ready to actually leave, he walked over to his wife and he gently leaned down and just told her that, hey, I'm gonna leave now, I'll be back soon. Now, Mock didn't really expect much of a reaction from his wife. He figured she would just sort of say, okay, see you soon, but no. As soon as she heard he was leaving, it's like her eyes opened wide and she almost looked panicked. And she sat up in bed and she grabbed Mock's arm and she actually shouted, no! And in fact, she said it so loudly that she woke up their baby. So the baby's crying.
Maybe
and
she's
Mock,
scared.
at first, he just stared at his wife in total confusion. Like, what is she doing here? And then he said, what's going on? Why do you care so much if I leave? What's wrong? And May Knock, his wife, still clutching his arm, she just kept shaking her head saying, no, you can't leave. And then she looked away like she was trying to find the words or something. And then finally she looked back at him and it was clear she had sort of calmed down a little bit. And she said to him that, you've been gone for so long, she just didn't want him to leave again. She said what she wanted him to do was just stay home right here. Don't leave her, don't leave their son, please. Something bad's gonna happen if you leave. You've gotta stay here. And when Mock heard this, it was actually kind of touching. The idea that his wife was, so protective of him that she didn't want him to leave. He liked that.
Yeah.
But, he smiled and he told her, yeah, but somebody has to go get food here. So I'm gonna go, I'm gonna get us food, I'll be back in a few minutes. This is not a big deal.
It's Final Destination
He gave his
before.
wife a hug and a kiss, and she's looking at him like, don't you do this. But he said, look, I'll be back as soon as possible. And then he turned and he left. A little while later, and Mock had arrived at the fruit stand in the market. The market was in the village center, which was a few miles from his house, but he had walked here as quickly as he could because, he had promised his wife he'd be back as quickly as he could. And when Mock went to the man who owned the fruit stand to purchase, the items that he had picked out, the owner of the fruit stand looked at Mock and seemed genuinely surprised to see him. And then he gave Mock an almost sympathetic look and then asked him, how are you doing? Now, Mock and the fruit stand owner were not friends, but this village was so small that everybody who lived there knew everybody else. And so, an interaction like this was not unusual.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that basically everybody knew Mock had gone to war, but they didn't know he had just gotten back. And so Mock assumed that what he was asking about was basically hey, I can see you're back from the war. How are you doing? Mock told the owner that, the war had been terrible, but, now he was finally home. He was back with his wife and his son. He's so happy to have a son. And so really, despite the war, he'd never been better. His life was perfect right now. But the owner of the fruit stand, when he heard this, he actually looked back at Mock with a pretty confused look on his face and was your wife is home? And Mock was like, yeah, of course. Where else would she be? The fruit stand owner was confused for a second and then just sort of shook his head and said, I thought I had heard something different, so I was just confused. And then sort of awkwardly, the fruit stand owner changed the subject and just said, okay, what do you want to buy? Later that morning, Mock returned to his home, now carrying several bags of food. And as he approached his home from a distance, he saw his wife out on the balcony feeding their baby. But from the looks of it, his wife was just sort of staring off into space. Mock called out to her, and it kind of snapped her back to reality, and she turned to him, and she broke into this huge smile. And then she got up, and she walked off the balcony into the house, and then when Mock got inside, she found her waiting for him in the kitchen. And for the most part, she looked really happy and relieved to see him back. It was phew, thank goodness nothing happened to you while you were away for 20 minutes. Her panic was gone. She was happy to have him back. And Mock was happy to see her, but at the same time, he also couldn't stop thinking about that strange interaction he had had with the fruit stand owner. How he had been like, oh, your wife's home? Like it was a question as if he knew something that he wasn't saying. And Mock was just thinking about it. And so as he put the food away, he told his wife, what the guy had said and how odd it was. And Mock's wife, when she heard this, she got really angry. And she told Mock that this was exactly why she had worried about him leaving the house in the first place.
I know what's up.
She said that ever since he had left to go to war, people in their village had been talking about her nonstop, spreading all kinds of horrible rumors. And so Mock asked her, what kind of rumors? What are you talking about? But his wife did not elaborate. She just angrily shook her head and then stormed back out onto the balcony. A couple of days later, Mock was out in the forest that surrounded his home, chopping down trees for firewood. He and his wife had not talked any more about the situation with the owner of the fruit stand and, the rumors that people in the town were supposedly spreading about her. Mock was ultimately just sort of puzzled by his wife's behavior. Before he had left for the war, she had always been very logical and independent. And so the fact that she suddenly seemed to care so much about what other people were saying about her and the way she never wanted Mock to leave her sight was just odd. The only reasonable explanation Mock could come up with was that, for the last year, his wife had spent a lot of time all alone with a brand new baby and with
and worrying about him.
Her husband was never going to come home. Like that would take a toll on you. And so his hope was that, now that he was home, that she would just, get better. So he was trying his best to just go about his life like normal. But, just that morning when he had told his wife he was going to go out and get some firewood, she had started sobbing and begging him not to go. And it had taken him like a full half an hour to calm her down and convince her to let him go because they needed the firewood. And so Mock really didn't know what to make of this. He just hoped that, in time, this would get better. And so Mock just went about his morning, chopping down trees to get some firewood. And at some point, as he was literally chopping down a tree, he heard footsteps coming from behind him. And when he turned around, he sort of half expected to see his wife, but he didn't. He was sort of surprised to see it was this elderly man in a long robe walking directly towards him. Like clearly, this guy is coming to talk to him. Now, for a second, Mock actually didn't know who this guy was, but then he realized, based on what he was wearing, that he was a monk. And then as he got closer, he could see that it actually is someone who lived and worked at a Buddhist temple in their village. And so this was not a total stranger. In fact, this monk was more like a community leader of sorts. And so as Mock was sort of putting this together, he figured that the reason this guy was coming over was just to, welcome him home from the war. And so Mock lowered his axe and smiled and waved. But the monk didn't smile back. Instead, he walked right up next to Mock, really close to him, and he looked around the forest in sort of a paranoid way, and then in almost a whisper, he asked Mock if he was alone. Mock was definitely weirded out by this and didn't have any idea why this guy was acting this way. But, Mock said, yes, I am alone.
I think I do.
At this point, the monk seemed to relax, and he told Mock that he really needed to tell him about his wife. And Mock kind of perked up, like, what are you talking about? And the monk said that Mock's wife had become convinced that people in their village were spreading rumors about her. And she'd begun going around town terrorizing people to get back at them. At this point, the monk leaned back and gave Mock this expectant look, like he thought maybe Mock was going to apologize for his wife's behavior or something. But to Mock, this information didn't make sense. His wife definitely had talked about people spreading rumors about her, and she was acting pretty strange and paranoid. But to Mock, this information didn't make any sense. On the one hand, his wife had, mentioned that she believed people were spreading these awful rumors about her.
And she's
so
acting
Mock had heard
weird.
that. But the idea that she was really doing anything about it other than being upset was just false. How could she be out terrorizing anybody when she literally was at the house with him, like all day long? She couldn't. He was with her. He would have seen it. So, as respectfully as he could, Mock told the monk that he must be confused because there was just no way his wife was acting on any of her suspicions. She might be upset about this stuff, but she's not terrorizing anyone. But the monk just shook his head and told Mock straight up that, no, you're wrong. everyone else in the village knew there was something seriously wrong with his wife. Like, everybody knows it. You're the only one who doesn't. And before Mock could say anything else, the monk said to him, if he was smart, he would leave his wife right now and he would never look back. And when Mock heard this, he did not believe the monk. Instead, he actually realized that his wife must be telling the truth about how awful everybody was being, spreading these terrible rumors about her. Like, she wasn't being paranoid at all. She had all the reason in the world to think people were out to get her or something. So at this point, Mock dropped the polite act and just told the monk to leave him and his family alone.
Yeah.
And then Mock gathered up the wood that he had chopped down and began heading back towards his house. But the next morning, Mock just couldn't get the conversation he had had with the monk out of his mind. I mean, mostly he was just angry at whoever was making up these weird rumors about his wife that was causing, people like the monk and maybe the fruit stand owner to say the weird things they were saying. But also, Mock didn't know what these rumors actually were. He just knew that something was being said about his wife. It was upsetting his wife, but he didn't know what the details were. He figured if he did have the context, have the details, then he could shut the rumors down much more effectively. But he also really didn't want to bring this up to his wife again.
No
He knew
shit.
it would just really upset her.
No
So he decided
shit.
that what he needed to do was go back into the village market and go talk to that fruit stand owner. Clearly, he knew more than he was letting on. So that morning, Mock got up, and as quietly as he could, he snuck out of the house while his wife and son were still asleep, and he hurried off to the market. And even though it was barely dawn by the time he got there was already a bunch of people that were setting up their stands. However, when Mock made his way over to where the fruit stand had been when he had gone there a couple days earlier, he found it was empty. And for some reason that Mock just couldn't even explain,
He knew it was his
this
wife.
immediately gave him a really bad feeling. So instead of waiting around to see if maybe the owner of the fruit stand showed up later, Mock decided he would just go to the guy's house since he knew where he lived. So Mock left the village center and jogged to this guy's house. It was a wooden building up on stilts, just like Mock's house, except it was further away from the canal. When Mock got there, he climbed up a ladder to the porch and then he knocked on the front door. But nobody answered. And so he knocked again, but still there was no answer. And then Mock pressed his ear to the door, but he heard nothing. It was like eerily silent. And at this point, Mock just could not shake this feeling that something was really wrong here, like with the fruit stand owner. So he just reached down and tried the doorknob, and the door swung right open. But as soon as it did, Mock smelled something absolutely rancid inside of this home. And so at this point, Mock, he covered his nose with his hand.
It's not rotten fruit.
Continued yelling for the fruit stand owner and began walking slowly into the home, looking around for the guy. But there was no movement inside of the home, and he's calling out over and over again. And then eventually he notices something on the ground. And he looks down and he sees it's the fruit stand owner. And he was just covered in blood and obviously dead. Mock sprinted out of the house, he climbed down the ladder and just began running away as fast as he could. And he knew that what he should be doing is going back to the village center to tell someone about what he had just found. But Mock just couldn't bring himself to do it because he just had this gut feeling that even though he had no idea if his wife was in any way involved with this death, he just felt like based on the rumors and the weird stuff with his wife, that everybody was gonna blame her. So instead of running towards the village center, Mock just began running towards his own house. And when he got close, he slowed down, sort of caught his breath, and he hoped that it was still early enough that his wife and son would still be asleep and he could just sort of
She's gonna be
sneak back
standing
in
there
and,
like
figure out what to do from there, but without alerting his wife and having to explain what was going on. However, just then he was close enough to his house that he could see the balcony that overlooked the water. And he looked up and he saw his wife was clearly awake. She was out on the balcony with the baby on her hip. However, she didn't seem to notice Mock approaching. And so Mock, he's just walking slowly towards the house, thinking, how he's going to explain where he's been to his wife. He figured she's probably upset with him. He didn't know. But he's watching her, and she, again, not aware of Mock, she reaches up and she grabs a lime off a nearby lime tree that was sort of dangling over the balcony. And so she grabs the fruit and she pulls it off the tree, and she drops it. She fumbles the lime, and the lime falls on the balcony and actually goes and falls between one of the slats on the floorboards. And this balcony is up on stilts, like the whole house is. And so the balcony was 7 feet off the ground. And so when the lime fell through the floorboards, it actually fell 7 feet to the ground below. And so Mock, he's watching this happen, and this is not like some meaningful event to him. He's just sort of, clocking that she's dropped this lime, and he's thinking she's gonna, grab a different lime, right? But no, he watched as his wife sort of almost robotically kneeled down and then put her arm into the slat that this lime had fallen through. Again, she still has not seen Mock yet. And he watched as her arm began to stretch away from her body, and down her arm went. It stretched nearly 7 feet until her hand grabbed the lime on the ground, and then her arm was making these horrible crackling sounds as it retracted back up through the floorboards.
Contortions.
And then she had her lime. And it was at that point that she turned and looked at Mock. Mock, at this point, was horrified.
Shit his pants.
And he just turned and ran. And this time, he went directly to the center of the village, to the Buddhist temple, where that monk had come from, the one that had basically tried to warn him about his wife. And so Mock, he begins pounding on the door of this temple, begging the monks to let him inside and to hide him from his wife. And eventually the doors open, the monks immediately let him inside, and they do hide him. And for a little while, he's just beside himself, Mock. He can't even process what he just saw. He's telling himself that, that couldn't have happened. Her arm couldn't have stretched that far, but it looks so real. He couldn't reconcile what he had just experienced.
Understandably so.
The monks, for the most part, just kind of let Mock have his moment of just being totally upset. But then eventually, when Mock kind of calmed down, the monk who had originally come to him to warn him about his wife, he came over to Mock.
She'd been dead.
And he said, I got to tell you the truth about your wife. But they told Mock that in order to do that, Mock was going to have to agree to do something that was going to be incredibly painful. They would need him to allow them to exhume his beloved wife's long-dead corpse. It would turn out that what everyone in the village knew, but Mock did not know, was that his wife and son had both died during childbirth while he was away in the war. His wife's body had literally been in the ground for months. Apparently her ghost was still around and very attached to Mock and would not let anybody get between them. It was not until Mock did give the monks permission to exhume his wife's body that they could finally stop this haunting.
I just thought of something.
And so the monks ultimately carved out a circular-shaped piece of her skull and performed a Buddhist ritual to trap her spirit inside the bone. Today, in Prakanong, the village where Mock and his wife and his son had lived, is now home to a permanent shrine to May Nok. She's seen by some as a very dangerous and terrifying ghost, and by others as a symbol of love that is so powerful it transcends death.
Wait a second, how'd that dude die? What? Did she do that?
I mean, it seems like they just fucking totally, the fruit stand guy just, fruit goes bad, I mean.
Fruit goes bad every
fruit
day.
Fruit goes bad every day.
I have a question. Did you ever watch the original It series, the movie? Okay, so there's a part where it's pretty much after.
You're talking about Tim Curry?
Yeah. After pretty much things have settled down, they think that they're good, they're safe, and there's these two characters where they're embracing each other and they're kissing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, spoiler, it's no longer her. And
right.
It's him.
Right.
And I always kind of think that could have played out a little bit differently. What 5 more minutes, who knows? But was that kind of a similar situation?
Oh, did he crack his dead wife? Is that what you're trying to say?
We don't. You're almost 40. Please don't say crack.
Did he crack his dead wife? Is that what you?
Not his dead wife, but ghost wife. He's been gone that long.
Oh, like Scary Movie where he puts the bag over top of the
Jesus Christ, yes.
the head of the thing.
It's different, but yes.
I don't know. All I know is the baby didn't have nothing to do with it.
The baby was.
I know,
too.
but it's like,
They
why
don't
do you
care.
got the baby
They don't
ghost?
care.
Let the baby ghost go on to heaven and all that. Why you got to hold on to the baby ghost so it can what? Experience shitting itself for a while? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I definitely don't feel like it's like, oh, the love transcends and everything. It's like, that wasn't her. Because if it were her, like, she wouldn't be fucking terrorizing people.
My opinion of ghosts has always been that they're demons playing games with people, making you doubt, making you hurt, making you
I don't know what
long
I
for
believe.
people, making your heartache worse.
Well, okay.
Because demons take advantage of vulnerable people. That's what they do.
So, just a short story that I've told before on this channel. When I was a young teenager, my mom and stepdad bought a house together of this old lady who had passed away. Her husband had passed away many years prior to her. She had been living in this house and she passed away. And we moved in very quickly after. And things happened in that house that weren't normal. Like doors would fly open, drawers would fly open,
Flies would fly open.
Right, it was just like it was really uncomfortable for me and made me very afraid. And for some reason, my mom was just like, "Oh, that's just Mildred." Literally, like she would say, "That's just Mildred," and that was the woman's name, and we knew that because it was all over her dishes for, church that my mother would reuse. And there was one night, when you just get the heebie-jeebies and you feel like something's watching you.
Yeah.
Well, I had my bedroom door open.
Shorty, whenever I eat anything.
A bedroom beside of me that no one was in, and it was dark and all the lights were off. And I was watching TV, but like I could feel that something was over there, and I was like, too chicken shit to look. There's nowhere else to go. I have to go through that room to go anywhere in the house. So I'm stuck, and I'm just like, holy shit. I literally am just like, what am I gonna do, Eventually, like, after what felt like 5 minutes, like I get the courage to look over. And when that happened, I swear, I know this sounds ridiculous, but there was like a darker shadow figure that walked across the room and disappeared. And I was like, okay, I can breathe, but also I can't fucking breathe.
I would have done shit myself.
And nothing ever happened after that. And we always had a theory, she kind of finally accepted that we moved into her house.
Look, I find
That's the only paranormal experience I feel like I've ever had.
I find it reasonable to believe that you and your mother stressing out about stuff was enough to drive an unsettled spirit away from their lifelong home. She said, "You know what? There ain't no way death can be worse than this.
Dad, I'm gonna send this to my mama.
These motherfuckers have done steamed the floorboards and scraped 35-year-old gum out from under the TV."
My God.
Yeah. Anyway, good story. Interesting story. I did not expect for the Stretch Armstrong move through
For the lime.
the lime. Yeah, of all things, especially there's a tree full of limes. You're gonna go and fucking blow your cover doing that.
Still,
I bet you that ghost was like, fuck.
Oh, right afterwards, yeah. Can't really explain that one.
And again, R.I.P. fruit stand guy. That guy
Yeah, totally.
he caught a
He had
stray.
blood all
He
over
caught
it.
a stray and was just nobody gave a fuck.
Maybe it was totally separate incident, and the murderer was like, yeah.
I know there's a ghost
that
around
ghost
here.
Definitely got him.
He gave somebody some fucking bad mangoes or something. Fuck that motherfucker. It was definitely the ghost. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all. See you
See you
soon.
guys.
Bye.